I want to just have you share with everyone, a little bit about you and your story and what turned you on to becoming vegan.
Yeah. Man, that's a loaded question.
I figured it would be.
So I'm a classically French trained chef, which basically means that I went through like all the classic training to become a professional chef. So I went to Le Cordon Bleu in San Francisco, which is the absolute furthest thing from veganism. Basically, we learned all the things like how to cook meat in its own fat and like croissants and butter and, cakes and all that stuff. And it was honestly like such a great experience. And I've actually been cooking my whole life. It's something that I've always been interested in. It's really, when I was in high school and I was like, okay, it's time to like think about college and like, what you're going to do with your life. For me, it was like I couldn't even imagine going to the typical college experience because I just wasn't into like socialization, I guess, in that way. Also, I just didn't want to like go the typical route. And so, yeah, when I was 18, I moved to San Francisco. I didn't know no one. I didn't know anyone and I had never been there before. And I was like, let's just do it. Let's go to culinary school in the city and like see what happens. So that's kind of like where a big section of my like culinary journey began. And that was really interesting for me. It was like definitely like I was a fish out of water at the time. I was, a lot of people in culinary school are not young girls straight out of high
Okay.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get people from like all ages, from all different walks of life. It's kind of just like because culinary school is so expensive and it's so hard that they're just like, yeah, anyone can come and try because the dropout rate is like so high.
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
it's
crazy.
definitely like a hard industry to get into. And I think that's why I actually really loved it though, because it was just so fast paced. There was no like weird drama. Like everyone was really like upfront. It was like an aggressive industry. And I was just, I don't know, it's kind of how I was raised. So I really loved it. I loved being a chef. And like, so turning point, like my personal life, I've had endometriosis since I was 11. And so chronic pain and just like living with that kind of mindset with chronic pain on and off like opiates, like just that was my life and prescriptions and hormone replacements and birth control and IUD and all that stuff. That was my life since I could remember. I never experienced like periods as being anything but actual like a personal hell for me. And for a long time, I kind of thought that was normal, like in two senses, like when I would have painful periods, everyone in my life would be like, it's normal, it's just cramps, blah, blah, blah. And then also going to the doctor's office, it felt so unnormal because everyone was so uneducated that I would talk to about what I was going through. And so it was really like this weird place where I just felt like so, like I just didn't belong anywhere, like no one really understood what I was going through. And so, like, those two worlds meshed together, having endometriosis and then working in an industry like being a chef, it's just like the two just like don't blend like at all.
You end up probably eating a lot more sugar and things than you really
Yeah,
like,
just
would otherwise normally because,
all sorts of
menopause.
stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just stressful too. Like, stress and endo is one of those things that, like, even during this book launch that we're doing right now, I've noticed like my endo symptoms are kind of creeping back up just because I'm working way more than I usually am. And I'm just have so much going on that I'm like, okay, these are my little reminders to just like try to, clear my schedule a little bit. So yeah, that's pretty much like the basis of my story. That's kind of how it all got started, was just like suffering chronic pain and then trying to like exist in an industry that was not supportive of like being a woman in general, and then being a woman in chronic pain and just kind of like having to kind of deal with all that comes with that. So I ended up, after living in San Francisco and working like this for like 6 years, I ended up moving back home with my parents because I was so lost. I like was in so much pain. I just like couldn't work anymore in San Francisco. I got kind of caught up partying because, like, partying and doing drugs and that kind of stuff was the only thing that kind of made me feel normal. It made me feel like a human, because when I was on opiates or when I was trying to like recover from like pain cycles that I would have, it just doles you out. It makes you feel so like just not yourself. And so, yeah, I moved back in with my parents and I had this one doctor's appointment, which kind of changed everything for me. And he was like, because part of my endometriosis is I had like a cyst pushing on my back, but I also had a herniated disc. And so this doctor said that he wanted to fuse my spine together and it would like cure all my pain, but I would probably be in a wheelchair. And like, that's just what I was going to have to deal with. And at the time I was like 20, I was 24 going on 25. And I was like, what? You're literally psychotic. If you think that like a 24-year-old who's a chef by trade is just going to be fine with like the high chance that I'm going to end up in a wheelchair. So for me, it was like, there's something missing here. There's something nobody's talking about. And I just want to figure it out because this is just like not a way to live my life. So I kind of like shifted my like the whole way that I viewed my life in like cooking plate by plate, just making beautiful plates, like eating what everyone else was eating. And you know what I mean? Just kind of like living in that male dominated chef world to being like, okay, I'm shifting. I'm going to study nutrition. I'm going to do all the things that I can. And so I ended up going to like a nutrition school in Denver. And then I ended up switching to an online school, ended up doing like a plant-based certification. I just kind of was like bouncing around because I was like, I want to get as much information from as many different kind of opinions as possible. And then I'll take it from there. And so that's when I really shifted my business and my own kind of mindset around eating, because the thing that's so interesting is the thing that I learned how to do the most, the thing that I love the most is also the thing that was making me the most sick. Like it was, and there's also other environmental factors and stuff that were causing that, but it was mainly the food that I was eating. And ironically, like that was the thing that really helped me heal too. So it's like that one thing like contributed so much to my pain, but also contributed to my healing. And for me, that was like a huge, huge wake up call and something that, shifted me forever. Like once you kind of like unlearn and the veil gets lifted, you're like, oh my God, I'll never think about any of this ever the same.
Yeah. Well, we all can learn from, the past. And I feel like so much what you're saying, like I resonate
Yeah.
with in different ways, right? Because I was really young too, and I had period problems and lots of cysts
Yeah.
and all that. So I hear you on that, not to the extreme pain that you had by any means, but it is amazing how like our bodies really have this ability to heal
Mm-hmm.
ourselves through what we feed ourselves. And like you mentioned stress, and I was like so glad you mentioned stress because I feel like stress comes up on every episode
Yeah.
because in one way, shape, or form, stress is so intertwined with
Right.
our overall health, right? And so it's great that you've recognized, and I want women listening to like, I'm always talking about like just being more in tune with your body, right? Because our bodies are always communicating with us. It's then we have the choice of like whether to listen or just keep ignoring and like, oh, it'll go away, it'll go away. And it's like, no, it won't go away. It'll only get worse until
Yeah,
you change something.
exactly.
So
Yeah. And I think you can get into a stress cycle with the food you're eating too, because if your body's working so hard to process certain foods, like it's not going to help if you have a super stressful job. At the time, it helps because you're feeding into like a craving or you're like, and it's not like any of us are perfect. We all still do that sometimes, like we all sometimes unconsciously eat, but it's when that's kind of runs your life, it contributes to the stress. It contributes to everything that's going on. And I think it's just really hard to just break the cycle because at the end of the day, as much as I like to say like, oh, ease into it or blah, 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 at the end of the day, you just have to wake up one day and be like, okay, I'm breaking this cycle. Like I have to just change, and it really does, I feel like happen like that.
I agree
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. So yeah, I agree. Like little changes can be
Mhm.
huge, but you have to make that
Totally.
mindset shift to like, I'm in it to win it. And I really want to turn my health around or be healthier than I am today, which is something I've
Yeah,
continued to work on.
exactly.
So Chef Bay, I want you to talk about what was the food shift that you made? Like, what were those actual
Yeah,
things that you shifted from? Like, what were you eating a lot of that you're like, okay, no more, not happening? And then now, what did you shift to eating and making a bulk of your
definitely.
diet?
So I think because I think this will go into like why I became vegan too. So this whole time that I was learning about nutrition and like, kind of changing my lifestyle, I was still like pescatarian for the most part. Like I had been vegetarian for 5 years. I mean, a big portion of that is also like the animal welfare, environmental side, and also like, yeah, I come from a long line of butchers. I butchered, whole lambs in culinary school. And you kind of just get to this point where I don't know, I couldn't just pretend like they weren't these like sentient beings anymore. So that was part of that. So I'd always been kind of vegetarian and like, feeling like I don't belong in this world of butchering, but I'm there. And so for me though, the change kind of happened slowly. So my whole like health journey started with literally just like green smoothies. I became obsessed. I was like, okay, I'm gonna get like a NutriBullet and and this was like so long ago. I like laugh at this version of myself, but it's just cute because it's like everyone has to start with like the one thing that changes everything. And for me, it was green smoothies. I was like, okay, every morning for breakfast, because I grew up, my dad's from New York. So I grew up on New York style bagels with like a whole lot of cream cheese on there and like lox and like the whole thing. And so that's what I would have for breakfast with a latte like every single day. So I switched that like routine to no coffee or nothing. And I just would have a green smoothie. And I did this for an entire year. Like it was literally like the dedication of the lifetime. I was like, I'm going to drink a green smoothie every day. And it was like really started to shift my mindset of being like, oh my God, look, this is different. I feel better. And then on the days that I would have a bagel or after the green smoothie, I'd kind of be like, oh, I like don't feel that great anymore. Like, did I always used to feel like this in the morning? If I like backtracked one day or something. So that was like a really big awakening for me, was kind of just like shifting my breakfast. And it's ironic because now I barely even eat breakfast. Like I don't even crave it. I just like, I'll have like a cold pressed cucumber juice or something, but that's it for breakfast. And I feel so great. But was that switch because I used to wake up and be like so hungry that I would have to have this like huge thing of carbs or this huge breakfast. And it's interesting to see how it's changed just from that green smoothie. And so I kind of like went through the motions of kind of trying to get rid of processed food. Like, I wasn't huge into soda, but like cutting out soda, cutting out processed sugar, cutting out like never hitting the drive through at like a fast food, just kind of like these little steps of obvious things of just being like, okay, I'm gonna like obviously kind of shift my life and try to just get more whole foods in, whatever that looked like. And then I hit a turning point in, was it like 2017, where my endometriosis was still out of control. So I was still like, no processed foods, whole foods. I was like, God, I'm so healthy. Like, what is going on? Like, what's happening? But I was still eating lots of dairy and lots of fish. And after my last surgery, my recovery was so hard. There was just like so many things where I was so defeated. And my now husband was like, this is insane. Like, this is crazy that you feel like this still, and no doctors had, and, I'd been offered hysterectomies. I'd been offered, I had to get an IUD surgically removed and they wanted to like put it right back in. And there was just like all of this chaos and trauma around my body. And I was like, this is not normal. Like, what? This is not how it's supposed to be. So one day my husband and I woke up and we're like, let's, dive more into this whole concept of eating plant-based, because at the time it was the last thing I wanted to do. I had, of course, nutritionists, and we had chat a little bit before this, but I had nutritionists that were like, you shouldn't go vegan. You need animal protein for your endometriosis. And so I was like really listening to that, but for some reason, I just like wasn't getting better. And so we started doing tons of research, listening to tons of podcasts. One of my favorite podcasts is Plant Proof. Yeah, Plant Proof by Simon Hill. It's honestly like such a wealth of information. And my mind just started to get blown by all of these nutritional concepts that I had never really like heard of before. Even going to nutrition school is the opposite of kind of what you learn about plant-based. And it was also a last resort for me because I was addicted to cheese. Like I loved cheese. I was
You're like, what is there to lose? Right. Like,
yeah.
So why not try it? I always talking about like, we're so many times just like experimenting with our bodies.
Oh, totally.
And
yeah.
so I was like, be open-minded to try to try new things.
Totally. And it was so foreign to me. Like even the concept was so foreign, but I was like, I'm gonna go plant-based. I'm gonna announce it on the internet because I need to have some accountability here because it's we live in a very non-vegan world and it's becoming a little bit more like plant-based friendly, but like it's a very hard place to like go out to eat with friends or like whatever. Like, you're not really like surrounded by people like that. So it was really, I felt like I was like, okay, we're doing this alone. So luckily, my husband, amazing, perfect man that he is, he was like, I'm going vegan with you. Like, we're doing this. Like, you can't get out of this. I'm doing this with you. I can't watch you suffer anymore. And within 2 months of going whole food plant based, like no animal products at all, my health like shifted in this way that was like spiritual. It was this crazy shift, this crazy spiritual awakening where I was like, holy shit, this is it. And then after 6 months, I was able to get off all of my prescription drugs. I was able to slowly detox off birth control, my hormone replacements. And then after 1 year, because I mean, healing naturally is such a slow process. I think a lot of times people want this like quick fix or this, in 1 week, I'll lose 10 pounds and have all this energy. And like, it just doesn't really work like that. It's like a really slow process. And yeah, I just started learning how to use my skills as a chef and transitioning them into being a plant-based chef. And it was actually so much more from like a chef's perspective. It was so much more exciting. There was so much more to work with. There was so many more options because I get so stuck on like, okay, there's the animal protein and the carb and this and the veg or like then the sauce. And now I think of it completely differently. I just think like, there's just so much more has opened up for me creatively, that it not just only changed my health, it just changed my whole career. And at first when I went vegan, oh my God, all the haters online was like insane.
Oh,
It was
yeah. We
insane.
have to like, this is where like in the social media world, like you sometimes need to like not read comments and
Oh
have
yeah.
someone else filter them for you because it doesn't help us to continue on our
No.
mission to help women and people get healthier. And
Oh
what you
yeah.
said, I wanted to reiterate it to everybody because I talk about this as well. Like it takes time at a cellular level for like cellular rejuvenation to happen. And that's a
Mhm.
big part of why it does take time to heal, but you have to be in it to win it for like the long game. And so much of society is like the like instant gratification. Oh, I want this yesterday. Well, yeah, of course we want it yesterday. But if you're really committed to improving something about your health or just improving quality of life for long term, even if you don't have any health issues, prevention, I'm always like prevention, like ladies, right? If you can
Mhm.
prevent future things and hormonal issues and all this stuff and
Oh, for
yeah,
sure.
amazing. And I think part of it is like, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you with the dairy. I think dairy, and I think especially, I know for you, you were younger, but I think as women do get older, I think dairy is a huge, huge culprit of inflammation. I'm at a point after I went through my mold stuff where like I didn't drink dairy. I had stopped that a long time ago, but I loved like butter, and I'm not a big cheese person,
Cheese.
but
Oh,
I
I was
had
a
to, no,
cheese
I
fanatic.
wasn't, but I had to even quit eating butter and I haven't really
Mm.
even got back to I can do ghee. But that's it. But I think dairy in general, and a lot of women are like, oh, but my cheese. And it's like, but the cheese I find to be a big hormonal disruptor for a lot of
Yeah.
women and, causing inflammation in the gut and all of that. So like I wholeheartedly agree with eating a lot of,
Plants.
a lot of
Yeah.
plants, right? Eat a
Hmm.
lot of vegan, but
Hmm.
also I think for a lot of women, and I think there are outliers. There are some women. I've actually talked to a genetic specialist about the whole vegan conversation because I'm always like, okay, how does that work? And he says there are actually some people out there that genetically can thrive really, really well being vegan. More men than women. So Bailey, I would say you are an outlier, which is amazing, right? That you figured it out and stumbled across it. And I think everyone needs to eat more plants anyway. But yeah, it's very interesting. So yeah, anyway.
Yeah, totally. And like going back to what you said about like prevention, we live in a society like before, but when COVID was hitting China, right, when it first started, I was like, because a lot of like my studies had been on people with diabetes and people with chronic illnesses because I was obsessed with it. I was obsessing about like, how are all these people so sick? How am I one of these people that's so sick? And we look at like, we all have different chronic illnesses, but they're all like similar. You know what I mean? Like they're all different with different symptoms, but they're all similar and we're all suffering, which is a very big similarity to that. And when COVID first hit, I was like, this is going to rock the United States. Like, this is going to be really bad. Like, you're like watching the news, like, holy shit. Like, you're watching these videos in China and all this stuff going on. And when it did hit the United States, it did rock the United States. I mean, you look at the statistics of the people that, are in the hospital or intubated or that had died from COVID. Like you look at all the underlying conditions, it's like the average, it was a statistic along the line of like 75% of everyone that had passed from COVID had two or more underlying conditions. And like, that's a staggering number. Like that is insane. And so when you look at chronic illness in general, like even if you're healthy right now, you want to stay healthy. Like, let's keep it that way. You know what I mean? Instead of trying to push it. Cause I think as Americans, especially, we really like to push it. We like to push to see how far we can push our bodies to when it comes to everything, not just food, but like work and social media and like our mental health and like all this stuff. We're always pushing it to see how far we can push ourselves instead of being like, hey, like I feel good now. Like, what are the steps that I can do to take to feel good? Because for me, with my clients, people always come to me when it's almost too late. You know what I mean? When it's like, man, like I wish you would have came to me, or I wish you would have, of course, like years ago when you still felt good enough to be able to make your own meals, when you still felt, before it got too late. And I think if anyone can take anything from this podcast, it's literally just like, you don't want to push it until you can't anymore, because a healthy body and a moving body and an active body is all you really have in this world. Because without that, like, you can't do anything. You know what I mean? You can't be there for your family. You can't be there for yourself. You can't make those dreams come true if you're sick all the time. And I think that comes from a really genuine place, because that was me. I was sick all the time. I was going to the emergency room like twice a month. So yeah, now that I feel good, I'm always like, shit, like people have no idea how good they can really feel?
I so well said. You've said so many amazing things already that I'm like, so well. I'm like, no, that's going to be the beginning of this podcast episode. That's going to be the beginning of like, everyone needs to hear this. Again, because it is, and I'm preaching prevention all the time, but I find this too, especially with my core rehab program where I'm helping women to get out of pain and dysfunction. I'm like, ladies, if we could learn this stuff before we get into pain and dysfunction, do you know how much
Mhm.
easier it is? Like,
Yeah.
I'm of the belief that it's never too late to heal your body. But there's something psychological, and I don't know what it is. And if you have any insight, please do share. Like,
Yeah.
why is it as women, and a lot of my listeners are moms, some
Hmm.
have little kids, others have teenagers and, kids older
Yeah.
than that. But, as a mom, we push ourselves through like, and if you're working or even if you're a stay-at-home mom, gosh, like being a stay-at-home mom, I think is harder sometimes than going to work. Right. And
Oh,
so it's
totally.
like, I've got 3 kids and I'm in that stage of like, literally all 3 of them have activities now. And this is like my first time, like they're all back to school now because I homeschooled them last year. Right. So
Oh,
it's just like,
yeah.
it's crazy, but I'm grateful for this position. But we have to remind ourselves too, as moms, like we have to prioritize ourselves.
Oh, for
And if
sure.
we don't, like, it's that whole thing of it's so easy to put everybody else in front of you. Put your kids in front of you. Yeah, because your kids are always going to like need something, but you
Hmm.
are so much better if you can really prioritize you. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but don't wait until you feel like you're falling apart or you feel like you're starting to have or if you are starting to have some symptoms, but you're like, oh, well, that's just normal. I could talk about the peeing your pants all the time. Like, hey, that's a
Hmm.
signal, right? Or like you're getting gas and bloating, or you're having, cramps, or you're having really awful periods. Ladies, our periods are
Hmm.
like our body,
Number one
like,
indicator of your
yes,
health. Yeah.
exactly. So if your periods are crazy, all over the place, painful, dark, red, and clotty, like it's time to work on shifting
Hmm.
something. And nutrition is always the best, easiest place to start.
Totally. And I feel like too, like Okay, I'll office also preface this with like I don't have kids. I have a husband and a dog and like a really insane business, but I don't have kids. But I will say that from my friends that do have kids, I have one friend, she has three kids and they're like all different ages. But like I've learned a lot from her. She's like, look, I treat my kids not like kids, like human beings. And how, she has a daughter who's 12, and she's like, how I take care of myself is how my daughter takes care of herself. So if I'm too busy and I'm too frantic and I'm always putting everyone before me, she's like, that's how her daughter's Archie. She's like, that's how Archie is gonna treat herself when she's a teenager. And so, I've learned a lot from her in that sense, and just like that kind of rhetoric and or that kind of thing, like thought process in general just makes so much sense because it's so true. It's like, you know, how you treat yourself and how you be on a day-to-day basis is sending little signals to your kids all the time of being like, this is like how you are supposed to act when you're an adult. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
this is how
absolutely.
it's
Like,
supposed to be. And for me, like, my mom has been an entrepreneur forever, and my mom was like loves to work. So my mom would throw everything into her work and to her kids. And now that I'm like, my business is crazy, I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting these patterns of just like throwing myself into work. And although I don't have kids, like I keep having to remind myself, especially during this launch and everything that's going on right now, like, okay, Bailey, like you need to get your shit together and like put yourself first. And I have those like boundaries with my husband too, because we work together. So we own the business together. And like sometimes, he's a machine. He's like a 6'4" tall, skinny surfer, like machine of a man. Like the guy could just go and go and go. And I'll have to be like, okay, I know we have a packed schedule today, but like I need an hour, or like I need to go to sleep early tonight. Like you can work late. Like I need, and sometimes we fight about it, of course, but I think drawing those like extreme boundaries sometimes, and they do feel extreme, even though they're like the bare minimum, let's be real. But like, drawing those boundaries are like the only thing that keeps me going. We're trained to be these like workhorses in whatever sense of the word that is, whether you're talking about being a mom, whether you're talking about working, whether you're talking about any of it, we're trained to just like keep going. And especially post pandemic, I mean, we're still in a pandemic, let's be real, but post like lockdown, it's like everyone I'm talking to is burnt out right now. Like everybody I talk to is so fried because we went from being in this massive trauma stress response of lockdown to now post that, but also still in that and not being able to like respond to what has happened. And yeah, I think you just gotta like take it back like 20 notches. And I think once we can start to kind of like take care of ourselves, even going back to the green smoothie thing, even as simple as like, making yourself a damn smoothie in the morning, like that can just like change the whole trajectory of your day, no matter how busy you are.
okay, so I have to ask you. So, because I know
Yeah.
our listeners are gonna be like, wait, what's in that green smoothie that
Oh,
helped
yeah.
you transition? Do share.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly like to keep it super simple. So I'll like obviously lots of green. So it honestly depends what kind of blender you have too. So I'll preface that. Like if you have a Ninja or a
Your
the
Vitamix.
the bullet, no, the bullet.
Oh, okay.
Never put kale in your smoothies because then you're
It
gonna get
doesn't
this
break it down.
you're gonna get this chunky smoothie. I don't know. I hate a chunky smoothie personally. So yeah, so I really started with like lots and lots of spinach was like my jam. But yeah, now I'll do like I like to do my base is celery, cucumber, and spinach. I like love to just like literally pack as much in, and then I'll blend it up with either like a cashew milk I make at home or coconut water or something. I'll usually do coconut water because I live in San Diego and it's just so hot here all the time. So I'll usually do coconut water if I'm just went on a bike ride or something. I need like to kind of hydrate a little bit more. And then I'll just do like some sort of frozen fruit. I'll usually just do one. If I want to get like a little extra boost, I'll throw in like a whole kiwi with the skin, which is really good. It has so much vitamin. It has all your vitamin A for the whole day, which is actually just one kiwi. So, yeah, I'll just throw in a kiwi and like some mango or something. I hate bananas personally, but like I know people love to throw bananas in. I'm one of those like weird people that cannot stand bananas. And then I used to do protein powder, but I did a lot of research on protein powders and like they're not really that great for you. So I kind of
Like
stopped
what kinds of protein? Like I'm
just
not a fan of rice protein powder. I'm very anti-rice protein powder.
yeah, I was just kind of looking the way that like they dehydrate them and kind of the whole
Mm.
processes of the industry in general. Like there's just so many factors from the way that they process the protein to the plastic the protein sits in to the fact that it is a processed food. What like no matter which way you want to look at it, it is a processed food. So I
Yeah.
kind of was just like, and I had all this bloating. I started to get bloated because I was, I was like religiously taking my protein powder because I had this big fear of like not getting enough protein, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
And like, I was like, like, oh, sorry, I'm cussing.
It's okay. We can bleep that one out.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. My chef mouth sometimes is like, it just flies out of there. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So I just
Your
stopped doing
protein powder.
Yeah. I just stopped doing protein powder and I just started switching to protein powder with, I like the 3 seed combo. So I love flax, chia, and hemp seeds. I'll just do like a teaspoon of each one. And then I do like a huge gob of like almond butter in my smoothies. And my God, they're so good. They're so filling. Sometimes I'll even throw some like oats in there and I'll just kind of blend it up really well. But yeah, that's how I get it. And I know a lot of people who have struggled with protein powder too. And I would just say there's like so many other plant sources of protein that you can throw in your smoothies to get the same amount of protein that you would get from a protein powder. And you also avoid having like a lot of sugar and kind of unnecessary stuff that's in those protein powders too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm
so yeah.
always with any of the I've found two that I like to date. We don't drink them every day, but I do them because it helps my kids get more greens, but it's always a
Mm.
green based,
Okay, yeah.
right? It's more greens based and again, no rice. I don't know if you probably second that. I don't
Yeah.
know the rice protein powders. I've had clients in the past that were like religiously doing them and like they're touted as being so healthy and they were gaining weight. I go, yeah,
Oh,
because
for
this is
sure.
rice. Don't do rice, lady. Rice
Yeah, it's like
protein
powdered.
powders. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the science behind that exactly, but it can cause a lot of women to gain weight. Maybe men do fine on it. Again, this is where men and women are a little different. But okay, I was going to ask you about avocados. Do you put
Mm.
avocados? Do you like avocados in your smoothie?
Sometimes I used to all the time, but I prefer to just like eat them. Like I just like in the morning, if I do have a smoothie or something, or if I'm hungry, like more than not, I'll get like a super big avocado that's like perfect and I'll just slice it and put like a little sea salt on it and just eat it like that. I just realized that I felt like I was wasting a perfectly good avocado putting it inside of my smoothie. So I'll
Yeah.
just like make the smoothie and eat the avocado separately just because I'm like addicted to that like fatty, buttery, like kind of flavor from them.
Yeah. I love putting
Yeah.
avocado on just food and everything. Although you're in San
Everything,
Diego, so you get better
everywhere, all the time.
avocados all year long. We can obviously get them year round. I'm in the Midwest, but
Okay. Yeah.
there are definitely times of the year where they're not so good.
Oh yeah, no, definitely not. No, there's this avocado service that I was doing. I had to stop it for a while because there are people that live up here that just have like trees and trees of
Mm.
avocados that just don't know what to do with them. And so I know one it's a
It's bad.
California first world problem
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
was gonna say.
So I was getting this service. So I was getting a box, like a whole huge, massive box of avocados for like $20. It was like 50 avocados, insane. And I was just getting this, and I was like having to give it out to all my neighbors because and my husband was like, you really got to stop getting these boxes of avocados. Like, this is stressful because then you like have to feel like you have to eat them all like right away. And
You don't
yeah,
want to
anyway,
waste an avocado. They're so precious. I feel like.
no, there's
There is a
nothing
great
worse than,
place, I will say,
yeah.
for anyone in the Midwest. So if people want this resource, I can find it. In Florida, when they have the Reed avocados, I think it's
Mhm.
like winter. I want to say it's like January, February. Don't quote me on this. I can find the exact information to put in the show notes. But we've ordered them periodically, and you'll get the big Reed ones, and they last
Yeah.
a little bit longer too. So you'll get
Hmm.
them, and yeah, the Reed ones are my favorite, and it's a good
So
time to get
good.
those for those of you that are in the Midwest or an area where you can't get good fresh avocados like all year round. Because I
Yeah.
remember being in California, you pretty much
All the
always,
time.
all the time, good avocado.
Well, there's two avocado seasons. So it's like, I think one in the summer, one in the winter, or fall and spring. I'm not sure. I think it's fall and spring with citrus. But yeah, so there's two avocado seasons. So the male and the female like cross pollinate each other, and then the females, um, they produce one season and the males produce the other season. So it's really nice. And ideally, like a lot of people have two avocado trees. So there's always having avocados. Like I live in an apartment. That's my dream one day is to have the two avocado trees.
Yeah. Yes. Love avocado trees. Okay. So I want to talk about protein.
Yeah.
And let's talk about for those who are vegan or those that want to just get more, plant-based protein in their diets.
Yeah.
What are some of those top sources that you recommend for everyone to eat every day? Besides
Yeah,
just
definitely.
beans, right? Most people talk about beans, but beans cause a lot of people to get bloated. So
I like one of my favorite sources of proteins. I mean, from a what am I trying to say? I like one of those sources of protein that I talk about all the time that people don't really expect is like dark leafy greens and broccoli. And what those are also really good for digestion, overall health, blood pressure. Like there's just so many benefits to eating broccoli and dark leafy greens. Broccoli specifically has so much protein in it. It was one of those facts that I learned that I was like, what? There's no way. Like that does not seem right. But yeah, broccoli is one of those things that I just like love. I throw broccoli sometimes into my smoothies, broccolini, broccoli sprouts, like love it, love it, love it. But other than that, I love nuts personally. Because I could talk about like, beans and legumes and lentils. Like lentils in general are like one of those sources of protein that are so high in iron. They're so good for you. Like if you compare like lentils to like gram for gram to ground beef and you look at like the difference between like the fats and the amount of iron and the amount of protein, like lentils have more protein and more iron, per gram than ground beef. So that's like really helpful to kind of know that information as well. But yeah, I love nuts. I know some people are allergic to nuts and some people like different fats like don't work for them, but yeah, I've become like a cashew fanatic as well. Like avocados and cashews are like they're like my new cheese addiction, I would say.
well, is it cashew cheese is really good. I've had that.
Oh yeah. I make all the things with cashews. Like I just made a ranch with cashews last night. It's like so good. It's my favorite. And it's like so fun too, I think, because when thinking from a plant-based perspective, because people ask me this question all the time, like, how am I going to get protein? I'm so panicked. It's more of like a panic, like I call it the protein panic because it's very real. We also live in a society that's like protein, 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 protein. And a lot of times, like, when I went vegan, suddenly everyone is so concerned where I'm getting my protein from. But before I was vegan, no one cared. So it was just kind of like, wait, now suddenly you care how I'm getting my protein? What about like all the other nutrients that I need? Um, so yeah, basically what I tell people instead of like focusing so hard on like having to get like a whole bowl of beans, because a lot of times when you focus on protein in that sense of like, it's kind of like how I was talking about before, like your bulk of um your calories come from that like animal protein, right? So when we kind of use that same thinking towards plant-based eating, we're like, okay, we're going to have like a huge bowl of beans and then like a few of other things. And that's what can cause people to get, gastrointestinal issues, bloating. I love Dr. B, the Gut Health MD. I don't know if you know of him. He's great. He wrote the book Fiber Fueled. It was like a sensation last year. But I had him on my podcast and he talks a lot about like, especially beans in general. He talks a lot about it's like going to the gym. Like you would never go to the gym and lift like a 600-pound weight and it's your first time there. And it's pretty much the same with like eating a whole bowl of beans right out the gate. Like it's just like,
you have to give your body time to adjust to that because
yeah,
we talk a lot about gut health here, right? So it's like you have to give your gut health or gut microbiome time to adjust.
mm-hmm.
So like if beans bother you, I'm always like, just have a tablespoon.
Just have a little bit.
Have a tablespoon. And people are like, wait, yeah, because you got to slowly work yourself back. And I think a lot of people have problems with legumes, right? And I think it's the same. I would assume it's the same idea, right? There's a quantity thing there. Like a little bit can be really good.
Exactly.
And we go over the top and then people feel bloated and inflamed and all that. But, I'm sensing that like really you're getting a lot of your calories still from fat. And that's what I think women need to understand. Whether you're eating 100% vegan or you are eating, you're not, you still need to be eating a lot of plant-based and a lot of fat. It says
So much fat.
fats, ladies, for our hormones, for our brain,
I
for
love
like
fat.
everything, like and getting into more of a fat burning state, right? Like not that you have to be keto or anything, because I don't like there's a way like to do that and not do that and all that, but like just eating more fat. And I think women get afraid of eating fat because they think they're going to gain weight. And it's like, it's the
No,
opposite.
agreed.
And I think the thing with vegan too, where I find a lot of people make the mistake is then they're hungry, right? Because they're not getting enough fat. They're not getting the right nutrients.
Or enough calories in
Yeah,
general. And I mean, that's the
exactly.
thing too, is like, and that's something, when I coach men, when I talk to men, men and women will go vegan together. Like they'll be in a partnership. They're like, okay, let's go vegan together. And they'll be eating the same things every single day, the same amounts of food. And the reality is that like, you have to eat more often when eating plant-based because you digest the food much quicker. Like it just is so fast. Like honestly, my bowel movements being plant-based, it's just like boom. Like it's just like I eat something and it leaves in my body a few hours later. Like there's no this like waiting period for the whole day to have a bowel movement just like doesn't exist for me anymore. And I've noticed too, we eat this when we're eating animal protein, we eat like this huge meal and then we're hungry for a really, really long time. Well, with plant-based food, you eat a huge meal and then 2 hours later, you might be hungry again. And a lot of people see that as a downside, but the way that I like to look at it is like, it means that your body's digesting it. Like it's a good thing that you're processing it. All those nutrients, all those vitamins, all that fiber, all that stuff is going where it needs to go, and then your body's ready for more, and that's a good thing. And so I'm always telling, especially like women with men, if they're trying to do plant-based together, even if you just want to do it 30 days for like a little reset or to try new recipes or to retrain your mind, your husband or the guy in your life, your friend, whoever, is going to need to eat more than you, and he's going to need to eat more often. And if you're working out a lot too, it's the same thing. You just need to eat more food, and it's not a bad thing. Like it's totally okay. And yeah, and I love what you said about fat with women too, because getting lots of saturated fats or trans fats or fats from unhealthy sources or processed foods or red meat is not good. It's just not good for us, right? Like there's just different kinds of fat. But like if your body's craving fat, or if you feel like you're craving something, that's why I love avocados, because like I'll just smash an avocado and like all the craving is gone. I'm like, oh, I just needed fat, especially with like having wild hormones like I have. It's just like I just feed into that fat craving, especially because now I know like really healthy sources for that. And speaking of butter, I have an amazing butter recipe in my cookbook that you're gonna love. It's so
Okay.
good.
No, I'm
Yeah.
gonna get your cookbook because I'm always trying to, because one of my kiddos needs to really be dairy free. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so I'm always trying to experiment with different
Yeah.
things. So I
Yeah. Oh
think
my
it's
God.
great to add more vegan stuff into your diet, just personally
Hmm.
for me. And a lot of women that I tend to work with, I find eating more, meat protein. But again, I know that's not for everybody. So, but that's why I want to have you on to talk about this to just
Yeah.
like both sides of the story, because it comes down to really everyone's bodies are unique and everyone's bodies are different. And if like what you're talking about today is resonating with a listener here or there, a lot of them like just like all you can do is try it, right? Like you said, even if you
Hmm.
do it for 30 days or you want to do it for 7 days or you want to do it for a couple of days. I've found my max. I've eaten vegan different times. And by day 4, I'm like, I need a burger. I know that probably sounds gross to you, but like that's just me. And I'm like, I just need that protein in it. And it is just my body, because I have tried it different times for me personally,
Hmm.
where I'm like, I'll be like, okay, I have a girlfriend who eats vegan up until dinner. And then they always have, some animal protein with dinner. And I've tried that and I'll do good for a couple of days. And then I'm like, so whatever it is about my body, I've
Yeah.
tried. I can't, but I am all about like eating. I love when we got to restaurants to eat vegan food that's cooked really amazingly well. And
Well, yeah, that's a big part of it too, because I think a lot of how we're like trained to cook, especially like growing up with different cultures and stuff, is not plant-based. So it's really like learning a whole new way of cooking. And I just want to like finish my little point that I was talking
yeah, for
about
sure.
protein. I got totally sidetracked by talking about my obsession with cashews, but instead of thinking it as like the same concept of how you would eat animal protein, you really have to think of like adding more variety. So like that's what I always try to say is it's all about variety. So let's say you have a wrap, right? And you decide to like put a couple falafel on it because that has good protein. But then it's like I also make my tzatziki out of cashews and then I'll put broccoli sprouts on there and then I'll use like a brown rice like wrap, right? So you're getting protein from all these other different sources rather than just thinking about like, okay, I have chicken and salad or whatever it is. And it's really just looking at it from like, how many different plants am I eating in this meal and trying to maximize the variety and the amount. And once you start to focus on that versus focusing on like, okay, where's this big piece of protein on my plate? Then you're actually going to get so much more protein than you even need. Like when I break down the amount of protein I eat, because it's actually something I never even think about anymore because I find it to be like, I find there can be like an unhealthy obsession with trying to get as much protein. And when I actually learned about like liver cancer and kidney disease and all that stuff, a lot of that comes from too much protein in our diet. And that like blew my mind as well. I was like, oh my God, like this protein upset, like I knew it. Like there was something off about this, this makes no sense. And so, yeah, like I would say if you want to experiment with plant-based, just eat the rainbow, lots of variety, and just try to get as many plants as possible. So, and that doesn't mean like as many different kinds of spinach that you can get, but it just means like, like cucumber and, like for instance, I'll just go back to the same concept, like the falafel wrap. You'd have like mint and cucumber and greens and falafel and like a tzatziki of some kind and tomatoes and like a brown rice wrap. And like that right there has so many nutrients, so much protein, so much fiber, like all the things in there that when you eat that, you're going to feel so good afterwards. Like there's literally no going wrong with that. So
I love
yeah.
that. And I think that's great advice for everybody is eating more variety. I think even if you're eating animal protein, I think it's still looking at, we still should be having, I think it's like 75%, right, of what we're eating is still plant-based. And then if you're layering in, obviously, that animal protein as well. So variety is key for every single one of us because it's good to help diversify your gut microbiome. And it's good for making sure you're filling in the gaps of nutrients, right, that you may be lacking because you're eating the same thing every single day. And don't get me wrong, I fall into that from time to time too.
Totally.
But I remind myself, I'll like find, oh, this is in season, right? So it's like eating seasonal, I think is super important. Especially for those of us that live where we have more seasons. In California, it's all one season. So I remember living there and being like,
it's two. Okay. We have 2 seasons.
Okay. 2 seasons.
We have fall and summer.
I guess no one ever told me that when I lived there.
Yeah, there's two. Well, actually, it gets kind of rainy here in like January, February, March. It's like rainy, at least in San Diego.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Anyway.
So, okay. Now that we've made sure to have our protein conversation, I love that. So it's great advice. So is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you're like, I'd really like to share this with our listeners?
Yeah, I don't know. I think like you just like never know how life can surprise you. And for me, like I was so out of touch with what I was eating. And, I think this is an interesting concept too. So like I was so focused on like, oh my God, where's our food from? Like, where's our produce? I was really focusing on produce. Where's our produce from? Like really focused on glyphosate, really focused on, organic foods, really focused on produce. And then when I was thinking about going plant-based, I was like, whoa, like I'm so focused on where, and of course I was like, oh, I'm buying grass-fed meat and blah, blah, blah. But I also wasn't really paying attention to like what I was actually eating. And I like to really talk about food as like a transfer of energy, just as much as we talk about like the breakdown of nutrients and what we need every day. And when you look at food as a transfer of energy, when you look at it from a produce side, when you're getting it from a small organic farmer and you're getting like super great energy from that farmer who like gave you that meal. I think the same thing about eating meat too, because it's like when you're eating factory farmed meat, like you're getting animals that are just like petrified, you're eating, I call it petrified meat. You're eating petrified meat. And we living in a society that deals with so much anxiety, so much mental health, when you're literally eating a product of anxiety and a product of that, and I don't like to refer to animals as products because I don't view them in that way, but like you're also absorbing that meat as well. So there's just like something to really think about when you're really thinking about where your food comes from and you want to become conscious of what you're eating. It's like, okay, do I feel comfortable eating an animal? You know what I mean? And that was something for me that like shifted everything because I was never someone that subscribed to veganism. I thought that vegans were literally out of their minds, like to be totally honest. Like I was like, what? This makes no sense. But when I started doing research and like watching documentaries that made me feel so uncomfortable, like for instance, the documentary Earthlings, like I was shattered after that. I literally like laid on my bedroom floor and cried for like an hour because I felt so deceived by so many different things from my own training, from my grandfather who was a butcher, like all of this stuff. I felt so deceived because in my mind, I was like, how is this how we operate? Like, how is it so normal for us to treat animals like this? And then when I started doing more and more research about just like the health benefits of being plant-based, I was like, wow, there's really no reason to like to keep contributing to this. And of course, like you live in the Midwest. My husband's from Chicago, so like all of his friends argue this on with me like all the time. Like it's so ridiculous. It's so funny. But they'll be like, "Well, we hunt our meat and blah blah blah." It's okay. Like whatever. Like if you want to kill your own animal, like I'm not going to get in between you and the gun and like, this is just my opinion, but yeah, like I think it's an interesting thought to just like take a step back and think about the animal being just the animal and being like, having its own right to live and to live a happy life, because I think that's all we want for ourselves and our pets and stuff like that. And I think even if you don't want to go full vegan, like coming at it from just the eyes of with so much compassion, because I think no matter how you think nutritionally, I think what is going to save our planet is compassion for animals, compassion for each other, compassion for the earth. And I think a lot of that gets lost when we're talking about food, and I think I really hope that I can inspire people to think of all animals the same. We like even I go to the zoo and I don't go to the zoo actually, but I look at things like the zoo and I'm just like, oh, this is so frustrating for me. So I'm like on the whole other side of it. But yeah, I guess if I could just say anything, it's to just like have more compassion for, yes, animals and the earth, but also like bringing it back to women, like having compassion for yourself. And I think that's something that I didn't have for a really long time. I was so frustrated. I used to always say like, oh, I'm at war with my body. And like I stopped that narrative because it was just so toxic for my own way of moving forward, and I didn't have compassion for myself. I didn't see myself as someone who was suffering. I just was just kept trying to keep going and make money and survive in this bizarre world matrix that we live in. And yeah, just like having that compassion can change everything. It can change how you show up in the world, how you show up for yourself, how you view the world. And once you kind of start living with that mindset, like I really don't think anything will ever be the same.
I love that advice. Just, yeah, giving yourself more compassion.
Hmm.
So powerful.
Totally. Yeah.
Thank you, Bailey. This has been
Thanks.
amazing. Will you share with
Thanks.
everybody, like, let everyone know about your book? Will you just
Oh,
talk about
yeah.
that for a second? And then
Yeah.
let
Duh.
everyone know where they can find out more about you and get a copy of your book, which I'm excited. I'm going to get myself a copy because I always love,
Thanks.
love, love learning new recipes. So.
Yeah. So, okay. So I got a book deal mid-pandemic, which was like amazing. It was one of those things where I was like, okay, there is good in the world.
There is good. What I want to reemphasize that again
So
too.
much.
Like
Yeah.
we get bombarded, and so this is where you have to shut it all off and just
Yes.
remember and like take a moment, look around your house and look at your life
There's so
and just
much good in the world. Yeah.
give gratitude for the good that there is. And when we can actually
Mhm.
spend more time in that energy, like
Yeah.
it can shift a lot. So
Totally.
anyway, I'm excited for you. That's a
Yes.
congratulations. That's what a huge deal.
Thank you so much. Yeah. It's funny because I always wanted to write a cookbook. Like when I was a kid, I was like, I want to be a celebrity chef and I want to write a cookbook and I want everyone to make my recipes, like literally 8 years old, like filming myself making videos. It's been going on for a long time. And yeah, so I got this book. I never ever thought my book would be about going vegan, like never in a million years, but here we are. And honestly, I'm just so grateful for this lifestyle and what it's brought to my life. And so my book is called Cook, Heal, Go Vegan. And I talk all about my story with endometriosis. I also talk about like how to shift over. I have like little meal guides in there. And then my favorite section of the book, okay, I have two favorite sections. I have an entire section like dedicated to Mexican food because Mexican vegan is like honestly the easiest place to start. There's so many good flavors and spices and using lime and cilantro. It's like such a great way to create like beautiful plant-based food that you're really proud of. So like that chapter is really good. And then I also have a chapter called The Essentials, which I think is something that every single person needs in their lives because whether we're trying to go vegan or just trying to give up dairy, or because it's like one thing at a time, right? It's like everyone starts by, I think everyone pretty much starts by like switching out regular milk for plant milk. I feel like that's like the first thing that people do. Like, okay, I'm going to try almond milk today. And so, as much as I think that's so great, the issue is there's so much shitty almond milk on the market. Like, there's so much processed vegan food. There's so much processed food in general, but there's a lot of processed vegan food that's not great for you. It's full of just like gums and preservatives and sugar and like, oh, it's just full of just stuff that doesn't make you feel good. It makes you bloat. You know what I mean? It's just like not good. So I made this chapter called The Essentials. That's basically that. It's all the essentials. So there's my cashew hemp milk. That's literally so delicious. We make it for all of our skeptical friends and they love it. I have a butter recipe in there. I have a three cheese recipes. Wait, I'm like, how many cheese recipes do I have? Three cheese recipes. There's like a spelt bread recipe, like jam, how to make your own coconut yogurt. So I kind of wanted to do this because even though there's like, vegan alternatives at the stores, there's not vegan alternatives everywhere either, So I wanted this book to be for anyone, no matter where they live. And everything's also converted into the metric system. So if you live overseas, you can totally, use the book and not use the funky US measuring system. But yeah, it's all about the essentials. And it's just like going back to the basics, and just being like, okay, I can't eat Greek yogurt or whatever anymore because that used to be my thing was Greek yogurt. And I found that there was like, especially, 5 years ago or whatever, there wasn't any good vegan yogurts. There just wasn't. It was like the So Delicious one and it's so bad. It's honestly
I
the
second that.
worst.
It's horrible. There's a
It's
new good
so bad.
coconut one out on the market, but it's not cheap. So I'm gonna definitely be
Yeah.
trying some of
And
your
making
homemade
your own
stuff.
is so good. It's like so easy and so good and it's cheap and it's just like yeah, it's all those feelings. And so that's really where I wanted to start, where it's just like, look, and it's, cook, heal, go vegan. Because it's like, if you want to go vegan, this is your guide. But if you also just want to like become more familiar with eating plants and cooking healthier and just making things a little bit more from scratch without having to use any animal products, that's like such a good place to start. There's so many great like little things in there. And I also talk about like coconut sugar. And, in the front of the book, I have this little index of all my favorite ingredients and like what to really stock your pantry with and why they're really important. And I think that can be really helpful too.
I love it. Well, okay. Will you share your website? I don't think you mentioned it.
Yes, it's www.chefbay.kitchen. And I also have a membership where I teach cooking classes twice a month. And I have like little nutrition trainings and like this summer, we did 5 days to breaking up with dairy. So that was really great. And so we had like
There's a lot
five.
of people listening that need that.
Yeah, seriously. I
People
know. So
they think it's so hard, and it's
it
it's
is.
I
It
think it's more of
is.
a mindset shift, and like you get kind of we get addicted to certain things, and we think we
Oh,
have
yeah.
to have them to comfort ourselves.
Breaking up with dairy was the hardest breakup I've ever gone through. And I've had some gnarly breakups. I'll tell you that. Like, honestly, it was so hard for me. I felt like I was missing out on a big part of life, mainly because I loved a good cheese board and like, I don't know, I loved cheese.
Well, now
Also,
you can use dairy free cheeses. Okay, there's a cream cheese that I love out there. Do you have a cream cheese recipe in there?
Not in the
Okay.
cookbook, but I do on my website.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna look for
It's
it
free.
because there's
Yeah.
a dairy-free one that we get that is, I'm like, it is better
Is
than
it
the
the Kite
real
Hill
stuff.
one?
No, it's the BioLife one.
Oh yeah, that one's really good. The
That
coconut
one's
oil one.
really good, but it'd
Yeah.
be awesome to make because that's the thing. And like, and you mentioned, I just want to reiterate it too, is like going and getting a lot of dairy-free alternatives. They do have more gums in them. So that's where and the nut milks and all that. So like,
Yeah.
I'm inclined to make it. Although, quick question,
Mhm.
your milks that you make, are
Mhm.
they quick? Are they easy and quick to make?
Yeah. So that's why this milk I love because I hate straining almond milk. It's like
Yeah, it
so
takes me 45 minutes and I get like two
unnecessary.
jars and I can just go buy my, for less
Yeah.
money and less time, the expensive almond milk that doesn't have gums in it. So that's
Exactly.
right now.
No, this recipe is a cashew hemp, which is why I did that because cashew, the thing with almond is it has that outer layer. So it's like so fibrous that it doesn't like the Vitamix can't even get through it. So that's why I love to do cashews because I soak the cashews in the hemp seeds. So either in hot water for 15 minutes or just overnight, you just soak them on your counter and then you drain them out and then throw them into your blender with some dates, cinnamon, and salt. The whole recipe's in the cookbook. You just blend it until it's super creamy and you just pour it in the jar. It's
Oh,
literally so easy and
okay.
it's
Well, I may have
so
to
freaking good.
switch over to some cashew hemp milk then
It's
because
truly the best. And it foams like so beautifully for lattes. Like it's really like honestly, there's no comparison. There's no comparison. My husband's addicted to it. He makes like a gallon every other day.
that's awesome. Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm sold. We're gonna definitely start trying because
So
I
yeah.
want to make more homemade because I hate when my kids drink getting so much gums from things and
Oh,
you know
totally. Yeah, they
and
make me
so
bloat
it's
like
like
crazy. Like my stomach just distends out. And it's if you guys like it's one thing I'll say to your audience too, like if you don't know where to start on your health journey, like you have to start in your kitchen. Like it's just like such an easy place to start. I mean, it might not be easy for you, but that's okay. It will be eventually. And so if you have any questions about cooking or anything, like that's what I do. I teach people how to cook and heal through their kitchens. And whether you get the cookbook or just follow me on Instagram or take some of our classes, like there's ways for every single person to heal through food and it's possible.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for everything that you do to help people get
Thanks.
healthier. So this has
Thank
been
you so
awesome.
much. It's been a pleasure.